Interaction. We've been all night asking people about the issues facing the black community. My name is Matthew. Your name, sir? Quasi. And your name? Lauren. Okay. Lauren, we're asking questions about the black community, issues facing the black community right now. Being at Shoreditch, we find a lot of black people here to ask. So we're just asking some questions. So, Quasi, I just wanted to ask, right? What do you feel is the main issue facing the black community today in London?
In London?
Yes.
Well,
without the perspective of, let's say, the United States.
Probably, I would say, a lot of bias and kind of unrecognised bias.
In what sense? What do you mean?
In like, because the UK thinks it's solved its problem because it hasn't really dealt with it. Because it's not as overt racism as it is in the US. So like, you've got a lot of issues here, thinking that, you know, the black community's happy with how things are going in the UK because it's not the US, because they're not getting shot. But I'm like, well, it doesn't mean they're happy. It means that you haven't really dealt with the issues at hand. So I think in the UK it's a lot more kind of covert racism than it is overt.
Yeah.
So that's probably the main reason. I think a lot of the things are kind of things that you don't pick up day to day. That people, it's also black British people. It's the fact that we haven't come as far, and we haven't had the the confrontation that the US has had. And because you haven't had the confrontation, you don't think that you need to get that point over as strongly. So if you haven't had that confrontation, you're still always at a point where you're thinking things are good, but they're not actually as good as you think. I think that's in a short term in the UK, it's that kind of covert racism that I think is probably the biggest challenge for the black community.
Have you ever seen it firsthand, the covert racism?
Yeah, I think it's everywhere, right? Okay. It's like the UK is a class-based system, right?
What example do you have?
Just look at like where you go to school, where you go to universities, where you live, right? That tells you everything. The UK is based on a class system.
Okay.
It's based on whether you own a house, whether you went to a good school, whether you went to good uni. Right. All of those places are based in good areas, and also things that are unavailable to black people usually, and your life is basically run off that track. Yeah. So when you get into work, and it all spirals out of there. But no one thinks about it because they're like, oh well, you know, it's there. You've kind of got you're in London now. You're like, yeah, but you're in London, but you're like 10 years behind.
Right, I understand.
You know what I mean? Like you're 15 years behind your peers. So that's a huge problem.
Okay.
So that is it. And like, you know, if you're in London, if you're someone who's in London, which is more kind of multicultural, the chances are you won't have seen the same London that other people have seen.
Absolutely.
Like in America, there's two Americas, right? The America as a black person, or a successful black person in America as a white person.
Yeah.
So in London, there's also two different Londons. Like the London that you see if you're quite wealthy, and the London that you see if you're not wealthy. Two different cities.
Yeah. Two different places. Absolutely.
Two different places, yeah.
Okay. Do you know
But how do you feel about the N-word? Because personally, in my opinion, I don't use the N-word. I feel like it's very offensive. It's a racial slur. Yeah. But I want to know the opinion as to your opinion as to the N-word use. Should black people be saying it? If it's a racial slur, I don't understand because, you know...
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
You can say
it.
No, because just recently, like a few months ago, someone from Google got fired for saying the N-word, but she was like reciting lyrics from, was it Kanye West's song? Okay. And like, I think rightly she should have been fired because I just don't think it's okay to say that word. Okay. But also I think there's an argument of she was pissed.
Yeah.
She didn't really know what she was doing, perhaps, and she was just like reciting lyrics that, you know, in a song.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's a difficult one. Like, so you've got two perspectives. You've got the fact that you're trying to take back a word that you're trying to get rid of at the same time,
which is still being socialised at the same time.
Yes,
and so like you've got to ask yourself, is the biggest harm from the word being taken back or from the word being used more and more? And like I think like
something around like, okay, well, who can use the word? Who has the right to say the word?
I think like this is where one of the things where like you kind of, the thing that tells you whether it's right or wrong is how people are behaving in America, because in America the word has become so used.
So vocal.
And I remember one of my worst experiences traveling was like I was in Japan and it was great, and I came across these three Americans and they used the N-word, and I remember just being like, holy shit, no one,
they were white.
And because they think it's normal to use that word, and you're like, okay, that's the problem. Because it becomes like a normalized term that you can use, and that you've got to argue.
There's something around it if you're saying it in hatred and like you're saying it in like, you know, anger, then like what the fuck. But I don't know. When you're around people who are saying it like a friendly term, like it's gonna get.
I think that's the thing. Like it's become socially acceptable, and like in America and less so in the UK, because you never gave people the option. So that's the question, right? If you never give people the option, see what happens. If you use the N-word now, imagine with the shock. It would go. It would be like, oh my god, like. But in America, it's like, and I think that kind of tells you enough. I'm like, oh, that's probably that harm is probably more than actually taking the word back. I feel like we've taken the word back.
Right, okay.
I feel like we've taken the word back. I'm like, by using it now, we're just amplifying the harm versus how much it's being taken back for ourselves.
Okay. Don't you think it makes no sense for us to say the N-word when the Asian community doesn't call themselves the P word, or the Jewish community doesn't say the K word,
classic.
or Chinese people don't say the word, the C or the G word. So why are we using that towards ourselves when other groups don't use it? Why is it in rap music all the time? Why is it in all these films? Why is it acceptable when, if I say something about Jewish people in a friendly manner, I know for a fact that you're pretty much screwed.
Yeah.
But if the N-word is so socially acceptable, it seems like it's all by design.
It's taking strength back, right? Like you could use the word and okay, it's not derogatory. Like we own this, so.
I don't.
I
think.
I
How can we own a racial slur?
I think so. I was talking to like a Far Eastern friend of mine, and the point that is made by a lot of communities, like they're like just side pieces in the ongoing race war that is white versus black people. Like so everything like else, every other racial slur, it doesn't carry the same weight. It doesn't have the same history that it has behind it. It's because like this word has been something where you've had slaves come over, you've had this thing where people came to a country, and there is no other place has had this. But even though whatever is going on there, it never seems like a relevant thing to bring up because it never was a big enough. It never made enough a dent in the black versus white race war. In America, I'm not sure if you agree, but the black versus white race war is the race war that's still going on today. It's like it's a really funny comedy because it's like he says we've got no skin in the game because he's like well no one cares about if you call someone, and it's horrible, like no one cares if you make a Far Eastern slur or an Asian slur because you're like you wouldn't dare say you wouldn't dare say they don't do that either, and that's like they wouldn't dare, and it's like because you're like well. We want to get rid of the word, but in the black community, there's so much that's come with the word, and so much kind of hatred, and so many years of hurt that's come with the word. It's hard for people to kind of let it go. It's like the one thing you think, okay, we've got that, but at the same time, as you've got it, but is it worth the involvement of the US?
Right.
Like if you give people an option, they will take that option. That's simple. Like if you go to Europe, if you go to America, if you go to Latam, and Latam's a classic example. Like the words that they use for swearing are just used, right? Because it's seen as something you can use. You can use like puto, you can do it, it's fine. But like you would not dare to use that in another culture. But it all depends. Like if you
it's like female words in a derogatory way, and it's like
it's socially acceptable because that's what's been made. But if you sort of, is that a good thing?
Yeah, and the word bitch as well. That's socially acceptable.
Yeah, and it's like.
For example,
It's
widely used in Wales.
Of course, yes.
Totally.
Yeah, but I think to be honest, the word could do with getting
rid of. That's what I'm
thinking. Because what are we gaining from it? Right?
Exactly.
At this point, like we've done so much to get it back. We've written so much amazing music. I don't mind when we're doing it to bring power, but you have to think about what that power then brings to the communities that are hearing it, because to them, they're just still thinking.
You're putting power into a word.
Yeah, you're just kind of like, they haven't forgotten. It's like South Africa, they haven't forgotten.
Right, exactly.
Those words still exist, and people say they're using them, but they aren't. They're still there. Yeah. So if the word's still there, then people will still always think of you as that person.
Because a last question before I let you guys go. You mentioned you were in Japan, right? How is, because I was in Korea and I'd done some traveling recently myself. I want to know your perspective. What is it like as a black person How do they view you over there? What was your perspective of how they viewed you?
So I think like in Japan, they view you as they view anyone who's not Japanese. They kind of see you as like a bit of a foreigner. Because it's more, I think with them, it's more about the fact you don't speak Japanese. Yeah. So like, if you don't speak Japanese, if you're European, you're a novelty. If you're tall, like and blonde or something, you're a bit of a novelty. But it was kind of a bit more. It was a bit more like ignorance than something like that. But it was never like malicious.
Okay.
It was never malicious. I really loved it, and it's a great country.
Okay.
But I never felt like the fear that you feel again if you were in like the US.
I understand.
Do you see what I mean? It's
Yes.
like because again. They are way too interested in what the fuck's going on in Japan.
Right.
Like that's the thing. They are way too interested in being like, we're just trying to get Japan being like. That's why they advance in so many things.
Right.
It's because they concentrate on what they need to do
Yes.
rather than get involved in crazy other things. And I think that's what I found.
Okay, absolutely. I think that's a good question.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And your name, Lauren. Thank you, Lauren.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Fuzzy Lauren.